We're ready?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ready when you are, Joanne.
Okay, well, welcome to the Finance Committee meeting number 4-25. It is 1:38 p.m. Mountain Time, 12:38 Pacific, and the meeting's being held at the Water Center and online on YouTube and Zoom for the board members. Jennifer, do you plan to take attendance or just record everybody who's here?
I can do that if you wish. Let's see. So Chair Cole-Hansen.
Here.
Mr. Gibbs.
I'm here, yes. I've muted
Thank
myself.
you. Thank you. Mr. Raybould.
Here.
Mr. Stevenson.
Here.
Okay, so Chair Cole-Hansen. Here.
Mr. Redstone.
Here.
I'm here, yes.
Mr. Barker is absent.
Thank you.
Mr. McMahon.
Here.
Okay, I think
Stevenson.
Here.
I'm going to mute
Chair
this.
Cole-Hansen. Here.
Here.
Okay, to continue on, Mr. McMahon and Mr. Olmstead.
Mr. Olmstead's here.
Thank you.
Mr. McMahon here.
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 Okay.
Continue on, Mr. McMahon.
Dale, I need you to mute, please.
There still seems to be some back noise.
Continue on,
Yeah.
Mr. McMahon.
Dale keeps unmuting. Dale.
There he goes.
Okay, thank you for that. The next item on the agenda is the fiscal year 2026 Secondary Aquifer Planning and Management and Implementation Fund budget. Will that be Neely?
Yes, Neely will present that item, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Neely, you're muted.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm having a problem today with that. I assume that you can see my screen, my memo for the secondary fund for 2026.
Yes.
At the end of you'll be asked to make a recommendation to the full board for consideration next week. And they would adopt that secondary fund budget, which would become effective come July 1. So with that, I'm just going to go right into the budget. I'll zoom in because I think this is going to be hard to read. Is that a little better?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So if at the end of this meeting, I will update this spreadsheet, and then that would be attached to a resolution and a memo at next week's board meeting for the full board to consider. I'll just start here at the top. The FY 2026 proposed budget for the secondary aquifer fund. Staff is estimating a carryover of a little over 5 million. Then we have a general fund from 2026. That is the water sustainability funding that comes annually through the general fund, and that's 5 million. Then we have the House Bill 547 funds. Those are the cigarette tax that are primarily dedicated towards recharge. We get those on an annual basis, and that is 5 million. And then staff is estimating approximately $750,000 in interest, bringing the total amount of money here in the secondary fund, $15,941,425. And as you'll recall, the budget's primarily the operations for recharge and cloud seeding, and then some basin-specific line items that we'll talk through, as well as a couple catch-alls at the bottom for hydrology and administrative things. So unless there's any questions right out of the gate, I'll start here at the top and go into recharge operations, and then there's budgeted investigations. For conveyance, we're budgeting $3,500,000. And that's got 2 asterisks. That means at the end of the year, whatever's left in that will stay dedicated to that account, and it would build dollars over time that would allow the board to have those funds available on a really big water year where you need to recharge a lot. And I'll highlight that balance in that account here as we walk through the spreadsheet, but I just wanted to highlight that double asterisk. For O&M, staff is budgeting 200,000, recharge monitoring 750, and then down here for recharge site characterization and canal capacity investigation, staff is proposing 250,000, bringing that total program total for managed recharge to 4,700,000. And none of those would have asterisks, single asterisks, which would mean that we would have to come back before the board to get permission through resolution to spend those funds. By passing this budget, you would authorize the staff to move forward with those. Any questions on recharge before we move on?
Before we go to the other sections, Neely, can we go to the reserve that we have for big water years? And how much water, if we had a big water year, how much of those fees would be covered?
Madam Chair, I'm going to maybe let our recharge program manager take a shot at that.
Madam Chairman, members of the board, so at the 9.5, might be a little bit over that. I will double check that number. My best guess right now is that would probably handle 1 year of a really big year.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure we got that on the record.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Any other questions before we move to cloud seeding?
Yes, does anyone have any other questions on the committee on the recharge program budget?
I'm
Yeah,
good,
let's-
Madam Chairman.
Okay. I'm not seeing any others, so go ahead and continue on. Thanks.
All right. In the cloud seeding section here, this is broken up into 3 or 4 sections really: O&M, capital, R&D, and then there's a reserve. Staff is proposing a total of a little over 4.2 million for operations and maintenance, and you can see the breakdown of that here. You know, for the Upper Snake River Basin, the Wood River Basin, the Boise River Basin, collaborative program. That's with the water user contributions. Then the new basins. Here we've got the Bear listed there, the HCRC&D program, administration and technology, bringing that total to a little over 4.2. Moving down to the capital section, that's broken down into weather instrumentation, technology, and equipment. And staff is estimating $700,000 for that. And I guess before I go too far, you can see there's single asterisks next to several of these items. Those are all items that we'd have to bring back for you. So even though this budget would pass, you'd still get another chance to ask more questions before you release that money. Then the third section here is the R&D, weather instrumentation and modeling. Staff is proposing 1.625 million for that section. And then there's a reserve of 250,000, bringing the total cloud seeding program total to 6,828,290. Is there any questions or discussion of the cloud seeding?
Committee members, are there any questions about the cloud seeding budget? Other board members? Oh, sorry.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
Go ahead, Brian.
sorry if I'm out of order. So the 1.9 million for the Bear, and I'm all for the Bear, but I know legislators are probably going to ask me, is that going to be spent this year? Put it in this year's budget, or is that going to be partially used this year and carried over into, because I can't see we're going to get that kind of infrastructure built in the Bear this year.
Madam Chair, this is
Um,
Kayla. I can take a stab at that for you.
That would be great. Thank you, Kayla.
I apologize. I'm fighting a little cold. I hope you can hear me okay. But that will be covered for this year. So that is both money for the drone technology, some of the ground infrastructure, which Utah is pretty confident they can get some of those generators in this year, their operator. And then that does include some of the validation of the bear as well for this first year. So we do believe that that can be spent in this first year.
Thank you.
And Madam Chair, this is Cynthia. I might just add to that, that this is part of a proposal that is being will be brought before the board and the board's cloud seeding committee by the state of Utah. So there will be more opportunity to evaluate how that funding can be applied. And but as Kayla mentioned, yes, the intent would be to try and develop that relationship or review that proposal this year.
And I do see it has a single asterisk, so that it'd have to go before the full board to be approved. Okay, any other questions? All right, I think we're ready to move down to the rest of the budget.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. I will now walk through each basin, and then if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to jump in. For the Treasure Valley, staff is proposing 150,000. This is monitoring in support of the Treasure Valley model, and it's essentially an annual item, but we want to show it that it's going to the Treasure Valley, which is why we show it here. In the Raft River, we have the Raft River hydrologic studies and monitoring, and staff is proposing $50,000 for that. Moving down to the Fort Niff Basin, we've got the Fort Niff hydrologic study. You've been funding that for the past 2 years, and this would be funding 3 of 4, and staff is proposing $150,000 for that. Moving down to the Bear Basin, staff is budgeting $600,000, and we have included an asterisk here. And Cynthia may need to clarify what this is for. It's not necessarily water sustainability, but it may be used for. Is it? I'm not quite sure actually. Cynthia, do you want to clarify?
Madam Chair, I've got Neely on this one. That would be used for any Bear River, Bear Lake operational studies that might be needed as discussions continue between the states with regard to operation of Bear Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Patton. And again, that has an asterisk, so it would have to come back to the board to approve. Moving to the Lemhi Basin, support for the water sustainability initiatives per the settlement. Again, staff is budgeting $600,000 for this as well, but we have included an asterisk. And so we would have to bring back and explain the specifics to the board and get a green light. Moving down to the Mid-Snake Basin, this is the water quality monitoring. It's an annual monitoring. This is for, I think, the macrophytes there in the Mid-Snake, and staff is budgeting $50,000. Moving down to the Palouse Basin, staff is proposing a $200,000 budget for this. This is for aquifer monitoring. I think it's going to include a aquifer monitoring well. Moving to the Mountain Home Basin, staff is proposing $250,000 for the second year of the groundwater model development. And then for the Big Lost Basin, this is $150,000 in annual monitoring in support of the Big Lost model. The last of the basins is the Wood River Basin. We have the CEF, or the Conservation Infrastructure Fund, associated with the settlement. That plan was extended for 3 years, and it did include a CEF component that would ask the board to provide a match of up to $200,000 per year over 3 years. The CEF and the Big Wood River Management Committee will be coming before the board to propose this probably this summer. And then here, I just wanted to highlight that we have hit 0 on this in the Camas groundwater characterization. That is one where you have completed all 3 years of that work. And so you're no longer needing to budget for that. Moving down to hydrology activities, we've got ESPA monitoring. Staff is proposing 300,000. Statewide surface water and aquifer monitoring, 600,000. And then new monitoring wells and instrumentation for eastbound data gaps of 100,000, bringing that total to $1 million. Moving down to statewide, this is the professional services where we pay for media services and we pay for federal outreach. This is our Ferguson Group, Mark Limbaugh costs. And then we have some other administrative costs. Staff is proposing $250,000 for that budget item. And that would bring the total budgeted items of to approximately $15,178,290, and that would leave you with $763,135 in extra money or money reserved for work in other priority aquifers that comes up during the fiscal year 2026 that you would be able to draw upon. And with that, I would stand for any questions or discussion of this budget.
Committee members, are there any questions for Neely on this budget? Okay.
Madam
can't-
Chairman, this is Jeff. Under ESPA monitoring, is 300,000, does staff believe that's adequate to cover our current monitoring activities and what may be anticipated from expansion of recharge?
Madam Chair, Board Member Raybould, I believe so. We talked with folks in hydrology and believe that that's going to be plenty. But I'll let Wes answer that, and he may have a specific answer.
I can just add to what you said, Neely. In hydrology's looked at what they do, and this covers that. The monitoring that you're talking about, specifically related to the recharge program, that's actually up in the ESPA recharge budget program under the recharge monitoring.
Oh,
That's
okay.
where we
All
have
right.
that number at.
Thanks for refreshing my memory, Wes.
Not a problem.
But if I can add to that, do you see any shortfalls due to changes in USGS or that may or may not occur? Where we may need to pick up some slack?
Yeah, I'll answer that one, Madam Chair. So far, the USGS has indicated that stream gauging and their portions of groundwater monitoring are good. They haven't experienced any shortfalls or reductions in those areas.
Okay. And not an exodus of people taking the early options?
I think they're kind of like every other federal agency. There has been a reduction in staff, but they are committed to. They've told us they're committed to ensuring that the work they do for us continues.
Excellent. Okay, any other questions on this budget from other board members as well?
Madam Chair, this is Dean. Kind of going back to what Brian Patton was just talking about. Does that include the work they're doing on our modeling, like the ESP modeling and that work?
Madam Chair, Dean, yeah, as you know, we've had them working on, the big loss groundwater model and the Camas and the big wood groundwater model and some other things. Yeah, they've told us they're committed to continuing that work. In large part because that's externally funded by us. So that's sort of been my understanding is that's been given a pass in all the reviews that they've done so far.
Okay, thank you, Brian.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
Brian
go
Olmstead
ahead.
here.
Go ahead, Brian.
So just real quick, I see we finished that study on the Camas Prairie. I think that was the department. I'm sure they're looking forward to a report on that, and we probably are too. Is that a timetable on that, when that report will come out?
Madam Chair, Mr. Olmstead, that's a great question. I don't know the answer, but I will find out the answer. I know people that do know the answer, so we'll get that for you.
Thanks.
Okay, any other questions on the budget? I'm not seeing any, so I would entertain a motion to make a recommendation to the full board.
Madam Chair, this is Jeff. I so move.
This is Dean. I'll second it.
Okay, it's been moved and second to recommend this budget to the full board for adoption. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Motion passed. Okay, next item. The water management account and ARPA spending plans for fiscal year 2026.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Cynthia will lead that discussion.
Okay, good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members, board members. So yeah, following on the budget discussion, the board has, over the last number of years, set a spending plan for its water management account. As you're all aware, the board manages the revolving development account, water management account. We just discussed the secondary fund. And in 2022, the Idaho legislature also allocated approximately $250 million of the state's American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA funding, to support board-approved projects. And so today, I'd like to just focus our time on a proposed spending plan for the water management account, but would like to kick that off by just reviewing the plan that you set forth and you approved or adopted back in July of 2024 for the ARPA funds, just to reiterate that those funds have been committed and those projects are under development now. So I'm going to start by just sharing my screen to show the ARPA funding table. And let's see here. Okay, I'll jump to that. I think you can see that now. So again, this table may look familiar. This is again the commitments. This shows the commitments that the board made to 6 different projects, or essentially 5 different projects, and then a number of aquifer recharge projects last year. You'll notice that the board has received $200 million of the ARPA funding, and we anticipate receiving the final $50 million in FY26. The board has obligated funds. In this column, you'll see its obligated funds to the Anderson Ranch Dam Raise, the Mountain Home Air Force Base Resilience Project, assorted recharge infrastructure projects, the American Falls Dam Spillway Repair, the New York Canal Rehabilitation Project, and the Lewiston Orchards Exchange Project. Through those projects, the board committed all of the $250 million that was appropriated for its use. And to date, about $125 million of those funds have been expended. All of those funds are slated for expenditure in a number of cases in increments or installments in the contracts that were developed for each of those projects. So I think that's all I just wanted to remind the board of today. Again, those funds need to be spent by December 31st, 2026, based on the federal guidelines. Does the committee have any questions about ARPA spending today?
Committee members, are there any questions for Cynthia on this?
Okay.
I'm not seeing any.
All right, and I will go ahead and move. Here we go. Okay, let's jump into the water management account then. And this is a draft spending plan that was provided in your materials. Again, the intention here is to get feedback and a recommendation from the Finance Committee today, and then this can be reviewed by the full board next week at the board meeting. At the top of the spending plan, we've got a list of the appropriations that the legislature and the governor approved that are intended to be used to support regional water sustainability projects, loans, aging infrastructure, and other grants. This spending plan also incorporates the $30 million ongoing appropriation that was authorized during the 2025 legislative session under House Bill 445. That legislation includes specific direction for FY26. It requires that 50% of the appropriation for water projects be allocated to Water Board District 3 and 50% to Water Board District 4. And in fiscal year 2026, these funds are intended to be designated to support implementation of the 2024 stipulated mitigation plan that was entered into by the surface water and groundwater users on the Eastern Snake Plain. Back on May 14th, the Finance Committee met and had a discussion about this new appropriation and recommended that a new regional sustainability project be created to manage and oversee and dedicate funds for those ESPA regional projects. So you'll hear a little bit more about the regional sustainability priority list later in this meeting, but a project has been created. We're calling it the ESPA Regional Water Sustainability Project, and it's creative, I know. But the committee also on May 14th also discussed various programs that could be created or already exist to receive funding under this new regional project that would be in alignment with that legislative direction for spending that $350 million this coming fiscal year. So those recommendations are captured in this draft spending plan. So with that, I'll just walk through the spending plan and would like comments from the committee. So in this first list of projects, these reflect regional water sustainability projects and other large projects that the board has supported over time. Most of these, I think, have already been, you budgeted funding for these projects in the previous year, so these should not look new to you. There are a couple of notes here that the projects that have an asterisk by them are projects that are also eligible for ARPA funding, and we just discussed those. They're highlighted in the previous table. And so I guess rather than going through each of these projects individually, I just ask if the board members have any specific questions, but you can see that through these projects, the board has budgeted over $182 million of the total available funds at this point, which are $380 million.
Are there any questions for the committee members, from committee members? Other board members?
Madam Chair, Brian O. here. Cynthia, so the statewide recharge infrastructure, 40 million, our new program that's going to be the soft conversion program or for surface water to groundwater to surface. Will that, I guess, is that 40 million, can go either way on that? Is that considered same as recharge infrastructure or different?
Yeah, actually, good question. Board member Olmstead, Madam Chair, that is not. The board has, and we'll walk down through the rest of the spending plan, but we have identified funds from that $30 million that are initially slated for those groundwater to surface water conversion projects. The board has funded another a grant program that last year, I guess that was $20 million for the conversion projects, and that is also reflected below this. So this $40 million of statewide recharge infrastructure is intended for other opportunities, and I'll let Brian expand on that.
Right. Madam Chair, Mr. Olmstead, I think that if the conversion projects really take off and additional support is needed for those, this is a place you could draw that from. But we also wanted to leave some money for recharge in other basins, particularly the Treasure Valley. There's been some interest in trying to figure out what recharge might look like in the Treasure Valley and what it might do.
Quick follow-up, Madam Chair, but the injection well would be in this, if we do injection wells in ESPA, those would be in that recharge infrastructure.
Madam Chair, Mr. Olmstead, yes, they would be if recharge wells are constructed, yeah.
Madam Chair, it may be helpful to jump to the next section of the draft spending plan, which highlights the projects that would be specifically intended to receive some of the funding from this latest appropriation, the $30 million. And these again are intended to focus on the ESPA under that Regional Water Sustainability Project. And so this may help expand on the questions that Board Member Olmstead had. You'll see here that there are 4 programs or grants identified under the regional project. And that includes a Surface Water Coalition Measuring and Monitoring Support Grant, ESPA Recharge Infrastructure, ESPA Groundwater Surface Water Conversion Projects Grant, and a program intended to support surface water operational efficiencies. And I'll let the board know that later in the agenda, there will be more comprehensive discussion of each of these and potential criteria that the board can review to apply to these programs. But for the purposes of this budgeting discussion, you can see that we've set aside some funding for each of those programs and would be interested in feedback from the committee.
Okay, let's go ahead and move forward on that because I think the criteria might raise more questions.
Okay, great. All right, the next category here is reflects the aging infrastructure grants. And if you'll recall, in previous appropriations, $75 million was set aside for aging infrastructure grants. A number of rounds, I guess 5 rounds of grant have been implemented to date. And the board the committee, excuse me, in previous discussions requested that $20 million for subsequent, a total of $40 million be set aside for future rounds of aging infrastructure. And you'll see that here. So that would, the money set aside to support aging infrastructure grants would then exceed that original $75 million. And you'll see you would set aside $96 million under this spending plan. The next and final group of projects includes loans, grants, and other potential needs that the board may identify. Loans, this is a commitment that the board has been over $20 million has been committed under loans in the water management account to date. Some of those loans are in various stages, and those projects in various stages of execution. The first round of the groundwater surface water conversion grants program is reflected here. $20 million was set aside and over $13 million has been awarded of that $20 million for conversion projects. And again, you'll hear more about that in the next discussion. We've got efficiency and capacity improvements for canal systems. That grant has not yet been rolled out, but the board has set aside $20 million to support that. And then statewide monitoring and measurement, that is $10 million has been set aside for that. And again, that would support more statewide programs similar to those that are being implemented on the ESPA or will be implemented on the ESPA based on our upcoming discussions. And that leaves you with about $700,000 remaining for some other projects that may come up.
Okay, so Cynthia, I have a question before we move on here. Is the groundwater to surface water conversion projects grant program for 20 million under loans, grants, and other potential needs? Is that in addition to the 20 million that we have in the out of the 30 million for the surface water conversion projects?
That
grant?
is, yes, Madam Chair, that is in addition to. So again, those conversion grants, I believe, and Neely can speak to the different projects, but most of them are on the ESPA, though that was a statewide program as a grant program versus this new ESPA specific conversion project grant program.
So we would have some extra money left for statewide water conversion projects. Left.
Yes,
because we
that's
did-
true. Yep.
Okay,
Madam Chair, this is Jeff. I think we awarded some money out of this account. We did a round of granting out of this account for conversion projects already. I think to the tune of about $13 million and some change.
yes, that's
Yes,
what I
that's
recall
correct.
too. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. Okay. All right, I just wanted to make sure that wasn't, we weren't double counting it and that it was indeed different. It sounds like it is.
That is the case. So Madam Chair, in total, again, with the current interest that has been accrued to the fund, this would reflect a total of over $380 million of commitments. And with that, I don't have anything further unless the committee wants to discuss these in more detail or if you have any suggested modifications. If not, again, we'll bring this back before the full board with a resolution next week.
Okay, so Finance Committee, does anyone have any modifications or questions on this proposed spending plan for fiscal year 2026?
Madam Chairman, this is Jeff. I do not have any questions. Do we need a motion to make this recommendation to the full board?
Let's
If
see if there's
so, I would.
okay.
Okay.
I was wondering if any other board members may have any questions before we make the motion. Want to make sure everybody's happy before we move to,
Chair Brian O'Hare, I'm happy. I will have some questions on the criteria on some of this, but I think the amounts are okay with me.
okay, so I would entertain that motion now.
I so moved, Madam Chairman.
Second.
There's-
second it, Madam Chairman. This is Mark. I'll second it.
Okay, Mark seconded it. It's been moved and second to make a recommendation to the full board that this be our fiscal year 2026 spending plan. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Okay, not seeing any opposed, so the motion passed.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Cynthia. I guess we're ready to move on to the first grant program.
Yes, Madam Chair, we're going to move into telemetry grant recommendations. And we'll let Justin take it away with this item.
There we go. All right, and I can make that a little bigger too. All right. I'll jump right in. So the funding for this program was awarded through the Bureau of Reclamation to you all back in November. A round was run, applications were taken all the way through the end of March 2025. The board got 11 applications and we got them over to our review criteria, or our scoring committee. And a quick review of the criteria. So some of the projects that were looked at really focused on the purchase of telemetry and monitoring equipment. Excuse me. The program couldn't cover installation costs and things like that without getting into environmental work through reclamation. So it was strictly focused on purchase of equipment. The area was limited to the Eastern Snake Plain groundwater boundary. Costs were a 50% cost share up to $250,000 per application. I'll jump quick to the awards. 11 applications were received. All of the projects scored highly with the review committee. And so staff would recommend that all projects be funded. I did want to point out, and there's something blocking my screen real quick. There we go. Total funds requested were just over $566,000. The total round budget from reclamation was $2 million. Of that $2 million, you're able to fund the whole $566,000. We are working with reclamation to see, and generally has been received positively, that another round would be possible if you'd like. So I can jump to the resolution if there are any questions, unless there are any questions.
Are there any questions from committee members? Other board members? Okay, let's see the resolution. I guess we are.
All
We'll
right.
see.
Quick background, the resolution was adopted. It was 57-2024 in November for the criteria. Applications ran through March 28th. Jumping down, let's see, that to line 8, that the funds are intended to provide real-time information for surface water and groundwater diversions, enabling more effective and efficient management of limited supplies. The important part I wanted to highlight was actually down on line 26. It's now therefore it be resolved that the board approves to award telemetry and monitoring grant funding as specified in the attachment A, and attachment A is the 11 applications. And then 29, now be it further resolved that funding for the projects will be dispersed as funding is made available from the Bureau of Reclamation. So as it stands, a little background there, you have been awarded the $2 million. We don't have cash in hand just yet. I know that they're working on it, and I don't have an update for you today. I've included this just as a recommendation to make sure that everyone's aware funding can be dispersed as funds become available.
Madam Chair, this is Jeff. I'm wondering on that line 26, therefore it be resolved. Do we need to, it says it refers to attachment A, but do we need to have something in there that says not to exceed 566,000 and change?
I absolutely I can get that added. Not a problem at all.
Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. But with that, that's all I have for you on these telemetry and awards. I can go down to attachment A. It's the same table from the memo, lighting out the 11 applications and the 566,504.
All right. If there's no questions on this, I would entertain a motion to make a recommendation to the full board to accept the telemetry grant recommendations.
Madam Chair, this is Dean. I so move.
Is there a second?
I'll second this, Mark.
Okay. Been moved in second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? All right.
All right. Perfect. I will make sure that changes in there for next week.
And please keep us updated on the receipt of the funds from the Bureau of Reclamation.
Absolutely.
Okay. Next item.
Okay, we'll move into some criteria recommendations, Madam Chair. And first one would be aging infrastructure grants, and Neely Miller is going to lead that discussion.
Okay, Neely, you're on mute.
Sorry about that again. Thank you, Mr. Patton. Yes, today I'll be talking about the aging infrastructure grant criteria proposed update. And I would just highlight that this is a statewide grant. So this is not one of the ones that would be part of that ESPA priority list project. This one is a statewide eligibility. And we've updated it here to just be consistent with the recent flood grant criteria that was amended or updated at the March board meeting. And then as well to address the cost share. In working with staff and getting feedback from board members, staff is proposing to keep the funding cap of $2 million per project in one project per application, but staff is proposing that a board grant proportion cannot exceed 50% of total project costs. And currently it's at 33% of total project costs. So that would be a significant change. We've kept, ineligible projects the same, the eligible projects, the description is the same, the entities are the same. This is still statewide, no more than 50% of the budget in a single district, but keeping that cap at 2 million and then raising the grant portion to 50% of total project costs is what staff is proposing. We've also included here that contract term would not exceed 3 years after the grant funding award. Again, that's the date of the board funding resolution, but that could be extended through a board contract manager, if there's extenuating circumstances, permitting delays. But if it's just sitting there parked and hoping for money to come through, we can potentially reallocate some of that instead of leaving it obligated and going nowhere. We've cleaned up the application requirements just a little bit to make them consistent with our other grants. And then we are keeping the 120-point evaluation criteria point scale. And that is broken up into project details, urgency of the project, public interest of the project, budget planning, and cost effectiveness. And then we've listed here the grant process and the cost reimbursement process. And then, how to submit.
Neely, can I interrupt for just a second? Since you're on grant process.
Sure.
The second bullet point, funding awarded at the Idaho Water Resource Board's August meeting.
That is a good catch. That is incorrect. Funding would be awarded at a board meeting, but we don't want to be specific to a month. So thank you for capturing that. I had removed the deadline of August 1st from here, but I seem to have missed that. So that's a great catch. And then it talks about the submission process and where to send those. And this is the applications submission is consistent with our other grants. So with that, I would stand for any discussion of this proposed criteria change. Madam Chair.
Okay, and to reiterate, as you just mentioned, that you've taken out the due date for the grant application.
So this could be standalone.
So it can be standalone ongoing, and then that would be covered under a resolution when we issue the criteria out to the public.
Correct. When you adopt this criteria, say next week, you could have a line item. A line item in your resolution listing the application due date. And so I think that's how we could handle that in the resolution. And then I would just highlight also, Cynthia walked through the water management spending plan. This upcoming round, staff's proposing an August 1st deadline. So that's what will be in that resolution next week. That would be round 6 of funding, I believe. And so per that spending plan, I think that's a $20 million budget is what you would be setting aside for projects for that round. And again, I would go ahead. Sorry.
For some reason, I thought it would be round 5 and for fiscal year 2025. But no, maybe not. Okay, yeah, you're right. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, I think we awarded 12.3 million in round 5.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
So you have a little more money available based on that spending plan, but this is for the criteria, so I'll stand for any questions.
Are there any questions from committee members? Any questions from other board members?
Madam Chair, Brian O here. Probably in the wrong fund here, but ineligible, so municipal wastewater systems are ineligible. My question was if it was a reuse of wastewater to irrigation, similar to what we did in the city of Nampa. That was not aging infrastructure, I don't think, but would there be any exceptions to eligibility if it was municipal, but it was in fact a reuse system that was needed rehabilitation?
Madam Chair, Board Member Olmstead, the way we've handled those, we have had a few of those projects, and you're correct. If it's a reuse for irrigation, we have made those eligible, but we haven't allowed municipal drinking or wastewater systems to be eligible. So there is a little bit of a caveat to that.
I'm okay with it. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay,
All right.
Madam Chair, what's your pleasure? Are you going to want to hear all of these criteria recommendations and then have one motion or recommendation on all four? Or do you want a motion on each one of them?
I'd like to hear all four and have one motion if that will work with the committee.
I think that's a wise decision, Madam Chairman.
Okay. So we've looked at the aging infrastructure, so and it doesn't appear there's any other questions. Let's move down to the next grant criteria, the ESPA groundwater to surface water conversion grants.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be presenting this item. Yes, this is for the ESPA, the new ESPA groundwater to surface water conversion grant criteria. This is a new grant funding opportunity. It's different than the previously created groundwater to surface water conversion grant criteria, mainly in that this is focused specifically on the ESPA. The other one was statewide, although there is some differences based on what we're proposing here from the existing criteria. I'll just jump right into that. It's very similar to the previous criteria from here to here. Nothing's really changing except for Eastern Snake Plain Aquifer area of common groundwater supply is now the eligible geographic area. For the other program, again, it was statewide, but it was groundwater management areas and critical groundwater management areas. So this is specifically focused on the area of common groundwater supply for the ESPA. Staff is maintaining the cost share percentages that we had in the other program. Same that they must cease pumping their portion, and they can't be put in the bank, and they're required to replace at least 80% of their groundwater usage. They demonstrate that with historical pumping records. And then we have included some language here, if a project construction is underway or completed by the deadline, the project is not by the application deadline, the project is not eligible for this funding opportunity. But in talking with board members and getting feedback from staff, you know, there's some very large projects that were funded in that previous round that were on the ESPA that may be able to qualify for additional funding based upon these grant portion caps of 50% or 75%. So projects that have been previously awarded conversion grant funding are eligible to apply for additional funding. So those that have previously been awarded funds, this bullet doesn't really apply, that if it is underway, then it's not eligible, because I think that the feedback from board members was to give these entities a second opportunity. Grant requirements are very similar. What we did do also is we had a grant cap last time of, I believe, 5 million. Here we have removed that. Then we've got our evaluation criteria on a 100-point scale, up to 75 points for benefits and effectiveness. So we're really trying to see if these are effective projects, and we've got a mechanism in the criteria to evaluate whether they're going to be effective. And we have some points for project proposal clarity and detail, as well as urgency. And again, this may be related to, avoiding curtailment or to help supporting a settlement, which many of these will do. And again, we've just made the application submission and the process consistent, but we want to edit this, as Madam Chair pointed out in my previous criteria, that I'd still left this board meeting mention in here. So I would change this to funding awarded at a board meeting is the process, but it would not necessarily be the July board meeting. I suspect this would probably be at the September board meeting in reality, because staff is proposing an application deadline of August 1st, same deadline as the groundwater to surface water conversions.
You mean aging
then-
infrastructure?
I mean, yes, the same as the aging infrastructure. Sorry, I misspoke. They would both have a deadline of August 1st, and we would work with the board to prioritize one of those to process them in time for the September meeting, and if possible, maybe both of those by the September meeting. Otherwise, we would perhaps have a special meeting to award those not soon after. And then we have highlighted the process, the reimbursement process. And so with that, I would stand for any questions.
Committee members, are there any questions about this application criteria?
Madam Chair, this is Jeff. I think it's the third bullet down in the top section, grant considerations. We're saying to replace at least 80%. And then down under the evaluation criteria, we're going to give points for how much water they save. I think a mandatory 80% reduction in groundwater pumping might not fit the bill on some of those soft conversions. And although they probably wouldn't score as well as one that did reduce pumping by 80% in the evaluation section, I think the 80% cutoff line there is going to be prohibitive for many of these people who are looking at doing soft conversions.
So would you propose removing that bullet point altogether or reducing the 80%?
Yeah, we either got to reduce it or remove it. I'm thinking maybe remove it. I don't know. I just, most of what I'm hearing, people talk about conversions, they're soft conversions. And I think it's going to be difficult to determine whether it is 80% or not, because the soft conversion is going to be dependent on water supply. And in the years that there's ample storage water or very junior natural flow water available, they may be able to meet that 80% target or higher. But you get into a dry cycle and it could dip much lower than that. So I think it's going to be hard to put our finger on whether they've met that criteria or not anyway.
So, yeah, go ahead, Dean.
Madam Chair, I kind of concur with Jeff on this. Having had some experience with these, it's really hard to, we could put down an obligation. Yeah, we're going to have 80% of the time, but you don't know that going forward. A bunch of these conversions went a year and a half without water, in the last cycle. I mean, I think it's going to be difficult to prove you're going to be 80% going forward at the time you make your application. So I would suggest that we just take that part out. I mean, most districts, if you're going to put some of your own money in for a soft conversion, you're going to spend the money to try to find the water. So I would think if we just took that 80% out.
Okay, remove the whole bullet point. Yes. Okay, I know that there are other board members who've also had concerns about this. Brian O, are you comfortable with removing the whole bullet point?
Madam Chair, I totally agree with what Jeff and Dean are saying. I don't think you can guarantee that you can replace 80%. The other question I'd have I guess we'll find that out after a year or two, but You know, if we were gonna give more reward for a higher percent, possibly a higher cost share if they, you know, like we were doing with the hard conversion, of course, that was gonna be a 25% increase. If you know, if you can guarantee you're gonna get the water, I mean, you can't guarantee like they've said, but if you can pretty well prove that you're gonna get a higher percentage saved to the ESPA, maybe 50, there might be places where 50% is not enough incentive. For instance, if you're pumping from deep, then you've got some incentive from electricity and other things to convert. But if you're pumping from fairly shallow, but you still might have a big impact on nearby springs, the 50% might not be enough incentive. That's something we can find out over time. But no, I agree with what they've said. 80% is not very realistic.
Okay. So I
Well,
don't know. Yeah, go
Madam
ahead.
Chairman, this is Jeff. I think we should just take that bullet out. I think, and maybe it's already built into the criteria we use to evaluate the proposals, but what we want to make sure is that we're getting a pumping reduction in line with the amount of conversion water that's available. That we don't fund a project that delivers 10,000 acre feet to a pumping or a project, and we don't get at least an 80% reduction. We don't get 8,000 acre feet of reduction in pumping, something to that effect. I think that's important, that we make sure that we're not going to pay for some sort of a project that will just increase water usage in an area, but that we do get a proportionate share of groundwater pumping reduction for the amount of surface water that's delivered. Does that make sense?
Yes. But if we go to the first bullet point under benefits and effectiveness, project with a greater percentage of pumping offset will receive more points. What specifically were you thinking for an evaluation for that particular bullet point, Neely?
We look at what they're proposing to reduce and how they're going to bring it, how much they're going to offset that with, and then we calculate a percentage, and then we can compare those between projects.
So you'll be comparing the grant applications against each other. And the one with the greatest pumping offset would get the most points?
Yeah, ones with greater offset would get more points. One with lower amounts of offset would get less. Of that
Okay.
15.
Okay.
And several of those bullets get at the reduction. It's just coming at it from different angles.
Yes. Okay. All right. Is there any other questions about the criteria? So do we want a motion to remove the bullet point addressing the 80% before we adopt the criteria altogether? Or other committee members? Oh, go ahead.
I think that if you want to drop that bullet point, then yes, it would be a good idea to have a motion to that effect. And then that would carry through when you adopt all these criteria.
Okay. I think that makes it clean.
Yeah.
Is there such a motion sitting out there waiting to be said?
There is, Madam Chairman. I move we remove bullet 3 under grant considerations.
Is there a second?
Madam Chairman, I'll second that. This is Mark.
Thank you, Mark. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. All right. Let's move on to the next grant. Unless there's any other questions about the soft conversions, hard conversions grant program.
Madam Chair, could I just, sorry, Brian O here, could I just ask one more question, probably for Brian P. So we're going to give more points if they have a recharge component, which, you we need to make sure that if the recharge component is a recharge well, that they're meeting the specs for a, for a recharge well, which requires more monitoring and that kind of stuff. So it's just something we need to know in advance. We're going to give extra points for, and Dean can probably speak to it, but
Madam Chair, Mr. Olmstead, yeah, that's correct. And of course, any recharge wells going forward will have to be permitted. And yeah, they'll have to be permitted and they'll have to have monitoring plans, et cetera.
Okay, and before we move on from this one, I guess I have one additional question. Where the money has to be spent in Division 3 and Division 4 equally, the 30 million, do we need to put any criteria in here in this grant to split it up evenly, or are we just hoping to balance the books after all the programs are done?
Madam Chair, I think we can balance the books after, this round of awards. So we have some other line items within that $30 million that we can use to make sure those books are balanced at the end of the fiscal year.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right, any other questions on this particular grant criteria program? All right, let's move to the next one, the Surface Water Operational Efficiencies Program.
Yeah, Justin Ferguson will present these criteria.
All right. Let's see, I'll zoom in just a little bit. So this program is not a grant program. The way we've laid out this recommendation, just to kind of get this out the door up front, it's structured more like your existing loan program, where applications could be taken and reviewed by staff and then brought to you at the next finance committee meeting. So to jump in here, the focus of the program is to include, oh, I may have got ahead of myself. Okay, the focus of the program is to include purchasing and installing equipment, efficiency studies, and other activities designed to improve operational efficiencies. And I did get ahead of myself. I do believe this is a grant program. Oh, no, I had the wrong memo up. Nope, so let's see. I had them labeled backwards. Surface and water operational efficiencies. Actually, let me stop sharing for just a second and get things straightened out really quick. That is labeled correctly. All right. Okay. All right, we should be in good shape. I thought I had them backwards, but I believe we're in good shape. Okay, so jumping back up to the top, this would be an ongoing program, much like the loan program. It would be limited to diversions within the ESPA, and the application requirements, we've structured them to look at what efficiencies you can accomplish. So here, kind of starting at the top, efficiency is likely to be achieved. So we're looking at how the proposed project goals would improve operational efficiencies. What is it you're planning on doing, and how does that improve your current existing system? Consideration would be given to potential impacts to the ESPA for the efficiency actions, and I wanted to make a note that those would be reviewed on a case-by-case basis by the review team. The next thing we would look for in an application, again, is project proposal and clarity. We want to make sure it reads well, make sure it communicates what you're trying to do clearly, provide us a cost estimate, provide us an implementation schedule. Additional project funding sources, and this may seem redundant as we move through here. This bullet point, and these are not scored points, or these criteria are not points-based criteria. These are things that staff would look for in an application to bring to you. So the additional project funding sources is really just our way to see, are you getting federal funding for this? Is there other state or local entities that you've partnered with to get this done? And then the last criteria we're looking for would be, how does this project promote state and local priorities under the 2024 Surface Water Coalition Agreement? Eligible entities, excuse me, would be surface water users within the ESPA. And the funding limit, and this is the redundancy part here, but projects funded under this project could be eligible for up to 100% funding per project. We would, staff would assume that most applications would apply for 100% funding because why wouldn't you? But if there were other funding partners, that point was our way to see who else is out there. Contract terms that we wanted to propose. Funding for projects may be made in annual installments each fiscal year based on the amount of appropriations. And to kind of describe that a little better is something similar to the American Rescue Plan Act contracts, where payments were made in each fiscal year, or working with the sponsor, we can kind of tailor that based on what funding is available. The application process would look similar to the loan program, and kind of how we've structured it to bring to you. We would receive an application from an applicant, staff would work with them to develop a proposal, and then we would bring it to you all at the next finance committee for review, much again like a loan application. We've kept the submission to the grants team so that it is separate from the loan program, as we've included it with our grants, but it is an ongoing program. And that's really just to help staff direct traffic. And that's the end of the criteria. If there are any questions, I can hold here, or I can jump to the resolution.
I have a
Madam
question.
Ch-
Yes, go
okay.
ahead.
Madam Chair, this is Jeff. Back up to that funding up to 100%. I like the language up to 100%. If you had demand for grants in this category that exceeded your available funding, you might be able to fund more worthy projects at, say, 80 or 90% of total costs. That's a decision that we could make based upon what we see in the quality of the grants we receive and the number that would allow more good projects to move forward. So I like that.
Okay, how about eligible entities? Are we thinking that individual surface water users could apply for these? Was that a sound of frustration?
No, that's actually a great point, and I realized I can include the standard block that we use with our other grant applications to limit it to irrigation districts and things like that, in line with all the other programs. So I'll make a note of that quick and make sure it's there for next week.
I think that's a great catch, Madam Chairman.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay. Any other questions?
Madam
Any
Chair,
other-
Brian.
Yes, Brian.
So go back up to the top, Justin, the little ambiguity to me in the limited diversions associated with the ESPA, because, well, the question I'm going to get is going to be from the Big Wood. Are we eligible in Peekaboo to apply for this? And, to me, that should go through the C, which we fund that, but on the other hand, they do have some impact, I guess, on AFR2, which would clearly be. So maybe that's just fine. To have associated just seems.
Are they in the area of common groundwater?
It would depend on where you are within the Wood River Basin. Parts of the Wood River Basin are within the area of common groundwater supply, and parts are not.
We might want to add that language. That seemed to work in another one of these. with the ESPA area of common groundwater.
And I can make that change to make sure that's.
Yeah. Does
Yes.
that make sense, Madam Chairman?
Yes.
So you'd want canal diversions that are located, or canal irrigation districts or canal companies that have diversions located within the area of common groundwater supply.
Done deal.
Does that make
Wait
sense?
for that changes in there.
Yes.
All right.
Okay. So I think we need to have a motion to make that change before we adopt the criteria.
I believe so, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, this is Dean. I move we make that change.
Okay. That one and the.
Second.
Okay. So it's been moved and seconded to make the change to change the wording in the geographic area and in the eligibility entities. Correct?
Yes. Yep.
Dean, that was your motion? Okay. So all in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries.
All right. And then here's our other program. And sorry for getting turned around, but I think we're in good shape now. This program is as proposed, it would be a grant program. And staff have structured this to look really similar to the existing telemetry grant that you had using reclamation funding. The change here is that staff have broadened the categories and what falls within the bounds so that other projects can be eligible. Let's see, and I did want to jump to a quick important note that staff had proposed. So in this grant program, people would be eligible to install, new monitoring wells, flumes, weirs, telemetry equipment, and things of that nature. As it's structured, we did add a note to say measurement and monitoring equipment must meet current department standards. And I made a note to add a link to the website's webpage to make sure that if they're not aware of what those standards are, they can jump right to it. Eligible projects. Again, this will look really similar. Measurement equipment for both surface and groundwater diversions within the ESPA, and that projects that are completed by the application deadline, similar to the other programs, are not eligible. We did add an example projects line that kind of differentiates between the reclamation program and this new one, that new monitoring wells and flumes and weirs would be counted. It would also be possible for you to cover telemetry equipment, software development, and automation equipment as well. Eligible entities, similar to the other grant programs, irrigation districts, boards of control, things of that nature. And then the geographic area would be diversions within the Eastern Snake Plain Aquifer area of common groundwater supply. The award limit here, staff have proposed a 50% cost share and $250,000 per project, similar to the reclamation program. I did want to point out that we did receive the 11 applications that you all saw earlier. Of those applications, generally they were within the tens of thousands. And so staff think the 250,000 should cover more than enough. Jumping down to the criteria. The first one, 30 points. If you can help us understand how this project promotes goals under the 24 Surface Water Coalition Agreement. The equipment installation is similar to the existing telemetry program. And the goal with that bullet point was to encourage first-time installers while not penalizing people that are adding to the system, just to get more out there. Implementation schedule, we would propose 20 points if you can get it done in 1 year, 10 points if you can do it in 2 years, and 5 points if you do it afterwards. And that's really kind of just to drive some of these to get done quicker. 5 points for a description of what you're installing. We aren't necessarily looking to help them decide what to install. That's just helping staff build a catalog of what devices are installed, what software is being used. It helps us have a insight as to what people are using to measure and monitor. And then points for project proposal and clarity, just make sure that your proposal is clear, it communicates what you're after. Grant application requirements, similar to our other programs, require a project background, a sponsor description, cost estimate, again, funding sources, if they're getting funds from the board as well as federal partners, soil and water conservation districts, things of that nature. Program administration. So staff have proposed this to be a 50% cost share, like the existing telemetry program. The application process is similar to the other existing grant programs that you all have. And the grant submissions would again come to our grant submission team. We've added a line to make sure that it is routed to the correct grants team. But with that, I can stand for any questions. I'm happy to go back if there is anything.
Madam Chair, just a typo correction. Up where you referenced the 2024 settlement agreement, Justin,
Okay.
I think that should be the SWC/groundwater district
Okay.
settlement agreement.
No.
Yeah, and I would just put groundwater district. I wouldn't put IGWA.
Okay.
Because each of the groundwater districts are the parties to that.
I can absolutely make sure that's in there.
Does it need the word settlement before agreement? Is that important? To distinguish between other agreements, if there are any?
Probably, yes.
Not a problem.
Okay. Any questions on this criteria, the criteria for this program? From anybody? Okay, I'm not hearing any.
Madam Chair, hearing silence, I would move that we adopt the criteria and make a recommendation to the full board that the criteria for aging infrastructure grants, ESPA groundwater to surface water conversion grants, surface water operational efficiency program, and the measuring and monitoring program for the SWC groundwater district settlement agreement all be recommended to be approved to the full board.
Is there a second?
I'll second it. It's Mark. I'll second it.
Thank you, Mark. So it's been moved and second to move this criteria forward to the full board from the Finance Committee. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passed. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, staff, to all the work that went into these programs. I know this was a heavy lift, a big lift, but hopefully this will make a difference in the years to come.
We have one more criteria update, Madam Chair.
Okay, regional water sustainability.
Regional water sustainability. And it looks like Neely started sharing a screen, so hopefully this one's pretty quick.
Thank you, Mr. Patton, Madam Chair. I'll try to keep this brief. So today I will just be presenting to you an updated criteria for the regional water sustainability priority projects list. Just briefly, as you'll recall, back in 2021, the board developed its original list to help guide spending for large regional water projects. And then in October of 2022, the board adopted a criteria for the inclusion of projects on this list. And that criteria included a process for how projects can be added, the types of information required to be submitted in requests, considerations for inclusion on the list, and a process for removing projects from the list. I'm going to now walk through the proposed updated criteria. And I'll just say, and I've highlighted the sections that were updated. I did not update a lot based upon the feedback that I got from board members and staff. Again, everything is still the same here. Eligible entities, it's still a statewide. We define what an eligible project is and what is not eligible. Expectations for inclusion on the list have not changed, or staff is not proposing any changes. The first change we are proposing is currently as it stands, project sponsors can submit a request to the board to be added or included on the list, and they can do that every year annually. That deadline is December 1st. And then the second way projects can be included on the list is the board can add projects to the list at any time at your discretion. What I've done here is change that first item under the process. So now it says project sponsors can submit a request to the board for a project to be included to the list anytime throughout the year. So this would make it an ongoing program where they can apply throughout the year. So that's the first change that staff is proposing. Be happy to stop and talk about that now, or we could move on and come back to this.
I think let's move on.
Projects sponsors and what they would provide would remain the same. Considerations for inclusion on the list is really the next change. We've added a bullet here that says the project demonstrates broad stakeholder support, including legislative support. And this is to just show that the proponents of projects have really engaged stakeholders in their area and built that support, as well as engaging their legislators, informing them about the values and working with them, or not. But whether it did have that support or not would be a consideration I think the board may want to have added here. And then as well, the rest of these, no changes are being proposed. So they are all pretty much the same. And then the last part of the criteria is how a project is removed. It's either fully funded or implemented, and or sponsor of the project requests it be removed, or the board removes the project at your discretion. So with that would be the extent of the changes I'm proposing. I realize as I'm looking at this right now, we may want to add this as well, because if we're not going to have the December 1 update, the December 1 deadline to submit a request, perhaps, and that the board can update the list anytime. Perhaps we don't want this language here as well, that it would be updated annually at the January meeting. Maybe that's no longer needed. So I would open that up, and any of the others I've highlighted for discussion. And if you have any comments or questions for me.
Okay, so I guess you would say that after a project has been added to the list by the full board, then the list would be updated? Is that what you're thinking?
Yes, if you instruct staff to add a project, we could update it at any time. Anytime it's determined that a project should be added to this list. So I don't know if it's necessary to have this set annual time where it is updated, I guess, but I guess that's for your discussion.
Madam Chair, this is Jeff. I'm wondering if it wouldn't be a good idea to keep that language and change the word updated to reviewed annually, so that we do take time at least once a year to look at that list and see what's appropriate to be on it, or projects that have moved forward or are no longer relevant could be removed.
Yes, I like that too. At the January meeting, is that?
Yeah, I think that's as good a time as any, but I think it's a good idea for us to indicate that we're going to keep our finger on the pulse of what's going on with this list.
So you making a motion for that change?
I must be. I move that we change the word updated to reviewed in that sentence.
Is there a second? Dean?
I'll
Mark?
second it. This is Mark. I'll second it. I had to get unmuted.
Okay, thank you, Mark. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, so actually, we probably could have just done that with the whole motion to accept the criteria as adjusted or amended. Is there any other questions or comments regarding this criteria, the changes that we're proposing to make? Brian?
I think
Madam Chair, I just can't keep my arm down, but the back up to the eligibility again. So municipal drinking and wastewater not eligible, but for instance, City of Moscow, if they come to us with a project, that would be both municipal and irrigation, I assume, or how do we sort those out? Yes, or again, to reuse. You know, if a reuse is part of sustainability.
Well, I think if we do something for the Palouse Aquifer, that's more of an aquifer stabilization project than it is a direct municipal water use project.
So they would be on the sustainability list, and they would apply for stabilization.
no, Palouse Basin is on the sustainability list already as an aquifer stabilization project. I think to get at your question though, staff has interpreted this as irrigation, wastewater to irrigation reuse is eligible. And if you want to insert some clarifying language, that'd be okay.
I was thinking that at some point we had a little phrase in there that municipalities may be, and maybe we did it for Moscow, may be eligible under certain circumstances or something. I don't remember, but I'm okay with it.
Yeah, we have, I think your City of Nampa projects, those 3 projects that were funded initially under the priority list. One of those is a wastewater reuse for irrigation project. And so that's how that fit under there. We could, I think, as Mr. Patton indicated, we could add some clarifying language there to say that those types of projects are eligible, if that's desired.
And Madam Chair, this is Jeff. I think the language is okay as is. It's not like once we make this recommendation, should the board approve it, that anything is chiseled into stone. If we found further down the line we needed further clarification, we could take this up again.
Okay. Yes. I think what we don't want to fund are things that would follow under DEQ's purview, like drinking water reservoirs, that sort of thing. Is that correct?
That's correct, Madam Chair, or standard wastewater treatment plants.
Yes.
Or anything associated with those types of things.
Okay. Because we're really looking at the supply, the aquifer in general. Okay, so Brian O, are you comfortable then?
Yeah.
I think you said, okay.
Yep.
So let's entertain a motion to adopt the regional water sustainability criteria with the proposed change, with a change we already voted on.
Madam Chair, this is Dean. I so move.
Thank you, Dean. Is there a second?
This is Mark.
This is Jeff, I'll second. Okay, we both did.
Okay. All right, the motion's been moved and second to recommend this criteria to the full board. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Okay. The motion passed. Okay, we're down to other items. Does anyone have any other items for the Finance Committee? Not hearing any, so the next item would be to adjourn. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I so
So
moved,
moved.
Madam Chairman.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and second that we adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you for sticking with this. This is a lot of information, a lot of good work that was done today. And we'll see you in Moscow next week.
See you in Moscow.